for the most part, it's been a bummer of a season, Marvelous. We've been talking about it all season long, from the ownership trying to buy Chelsea to Wilson Contreras and Ian Happ. Will they, won't they get traded? But when it counted the most, in the game that they kind of needed to win the most, the Cubs beat the Cincinnati Reds in the Field of Dreams game. Whether you were getting a nightmare from the Harry Carey CGI / hologram or having amazing dreams because you were watching heaven in Iowa, I think it was an awesome experience. And we are breaking it down here on the Sports Cubicle with the marvelous one, Dan Marver, with Devin Tingle, Paul Chivari, and myself, Mike Mercado. Marvelous. The Cubs won that game. Fireworks. It was an exciting one. Low scoring compared to what was the first game, but Chicago owning Iowa. We know the Cubs like to play in Iowa, but to see the pro team show up, to see a lot of the cool vintage, a lot of the cool videos, great production, I thought it was a great experience in a game that they needed to win, and they won it.
It was a good made-for-TV production. Drew Smiley was really dealing, and I mean, the Harry Carey hologram was something, but the hologram of Jenkins and Bench was something too. Billy Williams was there too, so you know they could. I guess they could have had holograms of Ernie Banks, but it's a made-for-TV event clearly, and they're not going to have it next year, you know, because they're going to, I guess, build a bigger stadium amidst the corn. So. You know, a lot of nationally could be argued that the attraction wasn't that great, the two teams being among the half dozen worst in all of baseball, record-wise. So that was an issue, but it was cute to have Votto and Happ mic'd during the game. So, you know, it was a little bit different that way. And, you know, the world got introduced to the new main man on Fox, Davis, who's taken over for Buck, who's left the network. So you know, it was a good event all the way around. It seemed like they accomplished what they wanted to, MLB, and I don't know what the ratings were, but you know, it was a well played game by the Cubs for the most part. So that's all we can ask for. And they have a chance by the time this airs to have swept the Reds because they won on Saturday and they're in a tight one on Sunday.
Yeah, you know, they're playing a lot better the second half of the season, the second half of what was the All-Star break and the trade deadline compared to last season. A lot of Cub fans are wondering what this is going to lead to into next season. We've seen this trend before from this team, a really interesting end to a bad season, then a very surprising season, and then they made a run to the World Series. I don't know if this team is destined for that, but when you're hearing reports from national outlets saying that Tom Ricketts is putting on record that they will be active in free agency, does that just mean that they're going to do what the White Sox front office tends to do and be like, yeah, well, we made him an offer, $300 million, although he asked for $400 million. Like, are they going to make real offers at Carlos Correa, Trey Turner, any of these guys? That's all to be determined. But when it comes to what happened in Iowa first, I think it was awesome. Great made for television. My whole family was watching it from when the pregame started on Fox at 5 p.m. all the way to the final pitch. It is a moment where if you're a Cub fan, even if you're a Reds fan, just this idea of winning that game when you're a bad team is pretty cool because it's the most important game of the season because it's the only game at that time. Everything is spotlighting it. And if you were, let's say, last season when the White Sox had won it, you're hoping it catapults you. It's a moment of momentum. So I think it's cool that they've had these two games. Chicago was there and won it twice. I think that's great locally. And I think it's great that there's going to be a little bit of a break. I think it should be maybe every other year, maybe every few years, every 5 years you do it, make it a rivalry game, making a historic game, try to do something like that. I think it was great, the uniforms they wore. I like the idea that they played with history because the Cubs uniforms were never actually worn in that order, but the caps were cool. The jerseys were cool. The color scheme, the logo, I think the Reds look kind of good. So it was a great production by the Major League Baseball, by Fox. And I think my only criticism is Joe Davis and John Smoltz it was just so quiet there. There were still 8,000 fans there. So I think the production was a little too quiet, but if that's the biggest complaint, I think it was a home run. And moving forward for this team, it's a big win. It's something you can look back in as we are evaluating the next 2-3 years. And we'll have to see. It's already mid-August. We'll see what the future for this Cubs team is in just a few months. We're going to be getting into what happened at Soldier Field in just a few moments, but when we're talking about things that happen at Soldier Field, that means the clock is starting to tick on owners getting together. And when you're a bad team like the Cubs and Reds, you can't get there soon enough. So marvelous one. Before we head into the gridiron, any final thoughts of Field of Dreams and just the last few weeks for this Cubs team?
Well, I thought it was interesting. The Reds were wearing their 1919 World Series uniforms, apparently, where they actually played the White Sox. And it was a best of 9 then, and the Reds won 5-3 in that series. And wasn't that the one where Shoeless Joe Jackson apparently threw the series, even though he hit like 400?
Full circle, my friend, a very full circle.
But I mean, in terms of the game itself, they accomplished everything they wanted to, I believe, in terms of the network and MLB. And so from that standpoint, it was neat. And I'm also quite surprised, just as an add-on, yesterday, the bullpen with Newcomb, Hughes, and Ullman, we had 0 runs to finish the game that Sampson started, which I didn't expect since they emptied out the whole bullpen. That was the one thing they did at the trade deadline. Everybody was gone except for Wick, who had pitched in any kind of a high leverage situation. I love the high leverage that they use. I never heard of that before this year. So that was nice to see that they still won't blow games in the late innings.
I'll tell you this much. If you're looking for any type of optimistic view, if you're a Cub fan, they are developing pitching. There's a lot of Albert Alzolay hasn't played this season, and you haven't really even thought of that because they've developed enough young pitching and they're going to be active. And I think that's what's going to be really intriguing if you're a Cub fan. It's if they can in-house develop a couple of decent positional players, sign an Ian Happ or Wilson or both to an extension, and you're developing pitching, you'll be a lot better quicker than you think you will be. And I think that's what the influence of money will be the difference for this Cubs team, is if you've already developed. If you don't have to spend so much money on a pitcher, what is the Joe Madden move? Is it David Ross? What is the John Lester signing? Is that Alex Correa? It's something that the Cubs fans and the Cubs organization and everybody in baseball is going to be waiting, because, again, this is a team that there is no excuse for it not to be active and good. But when it's not, it's a sleeping giant in popularity and revenue, and when it can be good. So I think that should be really a fun time for Cub fans.
Yeah. The network thinks the Cubs are a draw. They're going to be playing St. Louis and London next year. So there you go.
It's 100%. If you're ever wondering where you think the needle is going, look at where the network is pointing them at. But we want to know your thoughts. What did you think of Field of Dreams? What did you think about hologram Harry Carey? Are you looking forward to the future of this Cubs team? Do you think there is a light ahead of the tunnel, or is it a train barreling down on us? We are on Twitter at Sports Cubicle TV. It's the marvelous one, Dan Marver. It's Devin Tingle. It's Paul Chivari. I'm Mike Mercado. Now, Bears fans, you better get excited. You're not going to get a lot of them, especially against this team. But the Chicago Bears found a way to win a preseason game against the Kansas City Chiefs. More importantly, everybody saw what they wanted to see. If you're a Kansas City fans, Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City offense goes right down the field, surgically scores a touchdown. Business done. An easy day at work. Bears, there were some interesting moments. You saw Justin Fields get killed, and you saw Justin Fields make a good play, and a little bit of everything in between. Marvelous. Before we get to Roquan Smith, the preseason game 1, it's going to be interesting to see how these teams do this 3-game schedule, how new coaches with young teams like this use them. So how much is Justin going to play in game 2? Is it going to be 2 quarters? Is it going to be 1 whole half? Is it going to be 3 quarters? Something we got to keep an eye on, because there's no 4 games anymore. And just everything you saw, getting football back into our bloodstream. Your thoughts on the first preseason game of this NFL season?
Well, I don't get too excited about preseason games, and apparently the NFL doesn't either, since they cut off one. And in terms, and we're going to talk about Roquan, but I mean, there were a number of players that didn't participate, and the first string lost 14-0, and the second, third, and fourth string won 19-0. So that means nothing too. And I'm still a little, it wasn't the starting lineup, but I was a little concerned about Fields' protection. We did see an incident where he was sacked where there was a complete breakdown on blocking. So that's that. But it's good to see a local kid like Jack Sanborn from Lake Zurich make a big play and make the team, if he wasn't going to. So those things are kind of neat to look at. But in terms of the play itself, I mean, I was glad that Coach Eberflus was, in evaluating the game, was low key and talked about that he looked at the positives. But I'm so glad that he didn't say he had to look at the film,
No,
And by the way,
we can't do that anymore, Marvelous. We can't
by the
give
way,
our people PTSD.
you speak of Mahomes. You know who had the easiest job in the building yesterday?
Andy Reid,
Chiefs quarterback coach.
Yes. Oh,
By the name of Matt Nagy.
yes. Oh, he found another way, huh? He found another way to get a nice little cushy
That's a
job.
terrific job. Go, go,
Like,
go,
you know what?
Patrick.
Everything you're doing, good job.
Yeah,
Like, yeah, that
go,
looks right.
Patrick.
Yeah. God bless him, though. Hey,
Yeah.
God bless him. Somebody hired him. Did you?
Yeah.
Do you? How much stock do you put into the second back in the day, which was the third, but the second preseason game this time around? Do you put a lot of stock into these moments?
I think it's going to be a little different because of the short week. It's a Thursday game, So, I don't know if they're going to have some of the regulars like Montgomery or Smith will be signed. So to me, without the regulars playing, and probably they'll be, Fields will play this much or less, I would think, in this game. And, so it will be hard to really evaluate the preseason. And, because again, with a short week, I don't know if that's going to affect how they're going to handle it, because then they'll have the game with a long week to finish in Cleveland. So I think that game might be more indicative of if everybody's back and they decide to play them, what's going to happen in the regular season against San Francisco on 9/11.
Thank you, America. Yeah. You're gonna trust me, America. This is gonna be you don't want to watch this one. So let me ask you, Marvelous, when you're watching this team, let's say Cole Kmet is good. And we're using good just as average, respectable NFL players. Cole Kmet is good. Darnell Mooney's good. Justin Fields is good.
Yeah.
You have a okay secondary. Where does this Bears team go when it comes to wins? You see a lot of people talking about first, second, third pick in the draft. I think that's dreaming. As I look at, I get it. I get being in football hell, right? You're not a playoff team, but you can't get a top 3 draft pick. You're in football hell. You're a 500 team. You're the New York Giants. You're that team that just can never. And then when you do get the first round pick, you put it on a running back. It's that type of stuff. So where are the Bears? Do you think they are a 3-win team? Are they a team that's going to win 6-7 games? Where does this team? They do have the exit, the outlet of, well, if their tight end puts it together, we know it. Tight ends develop slower in the NFL. Justin Fields makes some throws. Darnell Mooney is a real number 1. And if they have a decent secondary, I mean, where do you think this team, are they going to be a bottom tier team? Are they going to be a middle of the pack? Where do you think, just after one preseason game, but what is your gut telling you as you're watching these injuries, these conversations, whatever the heck is going on with Tevin Jenkins, when you're seeing all this come together?
Yeah. Well, it's hard to say, but we were looking at 7-10 optimistically, and that's very optimistic, in my opinion, depending how they do against their divisional opponents, Detroit and Minnesota. Those might be critical determining how well they do, because those are games that some years are winnable. But and outside the division, I mean, they do have some winnable games against, say, the New York teams or whatever, Miami. I don't know. They have some games that they could win, but it's hard to say if they're going to do any better than 7-10 in my view. I mean, they have to do better on the line than what Michael Schofield showed yesterday, obviously, where he was completely beaten that play by Chris Jones. I mean, they were without Montgomery, Kmet. They also were without Pringle and Jones, the receivers. Mooney looked sharp, and he'll be the prime target now, it appears, for the team. So he has to have a great year. But I think that hopefully they're going to be a little bit more creative with Fields, with maybe bootlegs and play action, just to give some variety. Because you look at the other teams. I mean, I don't know if you watch the Steelers against the Seahawks. I mean, Trubisky with the first team Pittsburgh offense looks like a completely different player. So it's not always the quarterback alone that determines how successful the offense is.
And what's wrong?
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, to the imagination of the viewers here of the Sports Cubicle.
Right.
I'll say this much: there's optimism, and there's a lot of things to be, to have the critical eye on, and to be aware of what's going on. But I'll tell you what I also have my eye on is I like Ryan Poles. He seems to be a good dude. He seems to be a straightforward dude. I think him and Roquan Smith, they're both wrong right now. And I'll tell you why they're both wrong. One thing is, we've already seen Poles mess up with the Larry Ogunjobi stuff, and we saw him mess up with 2 of his own players, his own signings, getting arrested already. Roquan Smith is under contract. Roquan Smith knows, or we know as people who watch and talk about this stuff, where he's slotted when it comes to making $90 million over the next 5 years. But Roquan Smith does have the rights and in his sport to say, I want this amount of money and I want to do this and I'm going to do everything in my rights to get it. And Ryan Poles has every right to take him off the PUP list and to say, okay, ball's on your court now. This is a really good player, but this is a good player that's not going to get you the haul you want. And this is also too good of a player to just let go for nothing. So both sides, in my opinion, need to get this done now. Both sides need to get this done right now, because if you can't get draft picks for him in the first or second round, then you're going to get fleeced in this deal. And if you're not getting him on the field, you're only hurting yourself, your team, because the only thing better than protecting your quarterback with a good offensive line is getting a great defense out there to make sure you get the ball back and you can control time of possession. So both sides need to get together and take care of business. And I think this is a moment where we learn sometimes it's great to be your own man and not have to worry about an agent or anything. And then there's times where you're a superstar like this and you're going to make real money. Pay the 3%. Marvelous.
I agree. I mean, I don't think that we should be looking at drafting order necessarily. I mean, I'm hoping that they'll be in the middle of the pack, but I mean, I don't know exactly what they're going to look for. They do need some secondary help, I think. You know, even after this year, I don't know exactly how it's going to shake down, but it'd be good to get some defensive help and you know, a little bit of everything. You can always use a tight end or a fullback. You know, it depends upon what the best player is available. But as far as the season is concerned, I mean, they start off. I mean, against the 49ers, they're going to be playing. They're going to have virtually a rookie or second-year quarterback playing for San Francisco, so they should be able to take advantage of things. They need to get off to a good start, is my point. So I'm hoping that they do that, and if they do, then they may be able to be a 500 team, even though it's impossible to be exactly 500 now with a 17-game season.
That's going to be a nightmare for us.
Unless you have a tie.
Yeah. So, I mean, but on the idea of what Poles versus Roquan, they need to get this done, right? He's too good of a player to trade away, and he's also too valuable to not let play. They should know where he's right there. He should be getting paid right around where Shaq Leonard gets paid. This isn't too complicated. If you had to guess, should they get a deal done in the next week?
I would say maybe by the third game. I'm not so sure about the second game. Again, it's only 3 days away. So I think by Cleveland, I could see him available for Cleveland in the third exhibition game.
I think that'd be perfect. I want the Bears organization to not be just pushovers. I want them to be able to be strong and make smart decisions. And I want these guys to get paid too. And I think this is a situation where you can have your cake and eat it too. You just need to come to the dinner table together. And Roquan, please just get an agent. This would be so much less complicated if you had somebody in there so you don't get the hurt feelings. Things get personal when we're talking about millions of dollars. And now you have this rumor coming out from Mike Florio of tampering because somebody is going around looking for trades from Roquan to another team. And if he doesn't have an agent, that means it's coming from Roquan or somebody who's not certified. So this is going to get very dirty, very messy. Let's get it cleaned up because the season's already dirty enough without the rosters put together and the talent on it to have this distraction going over. But Marvelous, we have football back. That's great, isn't it? Just to have football back.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just looking at the preseason. I'm looking towards this 49ers game where we beat up on Trey Lance and take advantage of his lack of experience. And they got to get off to that start, in my opinion. And these games, you may not even see the starters at all. So how can you evaluate it, honestly? I mean, it's very difficult to make any judgments based upon preseason games. And I used to take some stock in them, but not so much anymore personally.
No, I hear you. And I think a lot of fans are like that. And I think we'll end it with this, that I just want to know what the hell is going on with Tevin Jenkins. Let us know your thoughts. We're on Twitter at Sports Cubicle TV. It's the Marvelous One, Dan Marver. It's Devin Tingle. It's Paul Chivari. I'm Mike Mercado.